The day my wife asked for a divorce felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. For 12 years we had built a life together, sharing dreams, plans, and the belief that we were working towards something permanent. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. The arguments became louder, the silence between them even heavier. By the time she finally said the word divorce, I could see in her eyes that her decision had already been made. Our biggest shared asset was the luxury condo in Miami. It sat high above the coastline, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the ocean. We had bought it 5 years earlier when my business was doing well. At the time, it felt like a symbol of success. Friends would visit and admire the view, and my wife loved showing it off. During the divorce negotiations, the condo quickly became the center of the discussion. My wife wanted it, every inch of it. She argued that she had decorated it, maintained it, and made it feel like a home. Her lawyer pushed hard, insisting it was the most valuable asset in the marriage. I was too tired to fight. The months leading up to the divorce had drained me emotionally. Every conversation turned into a battle, every decision into a negotiation. I didn't want another long legal fight. I just wanted the whole thing to end. Besides the condo, we also owned a small piece of land in Texas. We had bought it almost 10 years earlier as a random investment. At the time, a friend convinced me that land prices in that area might rise someday, but nothing ever happened with it. It just sat there empty and forgotten. When the lawyer listed it among our assets, during the settlement meeting, my wife actually laughed. "That land," she said, shaking her head. "It's worthless." Her lawyer barely even looked at the paperwork. Compared to the condo in Miami, the land seemed insignificant. No buildings, no income, just dry, unused property miles away from any major city. My wife leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "You can keep that useless dirt," she said with a small sarcastic smile. "I'll take the condo for a moment." The room was silent. Both lawyers looked at me, waiting for my response. Honestly, I didn't care anymore. "Fine," I said quietly. The agreement was written down quickly. She would receive full ownership of the condo, including the furniture and everything inside it. I would keep the Texas land and a few smaller assets. When the papers were finally signed, it felt strangely anticlimactic. 12 years of marriage had ended, with a few signatures and a handshake between lawyers. A week later, I packed my belongings into the back of my car and left the condo for the last time. My wife stood in the doorway as I carried the final box outside. She didn't say much, just watched silently as I walked away from the life we had built together. I drove away feeling like the biggest loser in the world. All I had left was a small bank account, a broken marriage, and a piece of empty land in Texas that everyone, including my ex-wife, believed was completely worthless. At that moment, I believed it too. After the divorce, my life felt like it had been put on pause. I moved into a small rented apartment in Austin, Texas, far from the Miami condo that my wife now called home. The apartment was modest, barely furnished, but it was quiet, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without constant tension hanging over me. Nights were long and lonely. I would sit by the window staring at the empty street below, wondering if I had made a mistake by giving up the condo so easily. Days merged into weeks. I focused on work, trying to rebuild my routine. My business had slowed after the divorce. The emotional turmoil had distracted me, and I was still paying off some debts from our joint investments. Life felt small, ordinary, and frustratingly slow. The Texas land, the property my ex-wife had mocked, was a distant thought in my mind. I had never cared for it, and it didn't seem worth thinking about. Its boundaries were just lines on a map, and its dusty fields offered nothing but weeds and cracked soil. One ordinary afternoon, while I was going through emails, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number from out of state. I hesitated but answered. "Hello." "Is this Mr. Thompson?" a professional-sounding voice asked. "Yes." "Speaking," I replied cautiously. "I'm calling from Lone Star Energy. We are conducting surveys in your area, and noticed that you were listed as the owner of a property in East Texas. Could we discuss access for further evaluation?" I was confused. I own land in Texas," I asked, trying not to sound as baffled as I felt. The man chuckled lightly. "Yes, sir. According to county records, you own the property on Highway 78. We would like to run detailed geotechnical tests to explore potential natural resources." At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe a scam. I asked him questions. What kind of resources, what kind of company, and why they thought I owned the land. The company insisted their records were accurate. Their excitement was palpable, and though I was skeptical, I agreed to give them access. There wasn't much to lose after all the next week. A small team arrived at the property. They walked the land with metal detectors, sensors, and small drilling tools. They took samples of soil and rock, marking spots on maps and writing in notebooks. I watched them from the edge of the field, still unsure if anything would come of it. For days I waited anxiously. Each call from the company made my heart race. I wasn't expecting anything significant. After all, it had always seemed like a worthless plot of land, but the energy company seemed convinced there was potential here. Late one evening, they called again. Their voice was tight with excitement. "Mr. Thompson, we've discovered something unusual. We need to conduct further, more detailed tests. This could be very significant." I leaned back in my chair, stunned. Something unusual, something significant. The land that my ex-wife had mocked and laughed at might actually mean something. For the first time since the divorce, a glimmer of curiosity and hope sparked inside me. Little did I know that useless dirt was about to change my life forever. The following weeks were a whirlwind of disbelief, excitement, and careful planning. Lone Star Energy kept calling almost daily, updating me with their findings, and asking for approvals to conduct more advanced tests. Each conversation left me both anxious and thrilled. Could it really be true? Could that forgotten dusty land in East Texas, the same land my ex-wife had laughed at, hold something valuable enough to change my life? Finally, the day arrived. When the company's geologists were ready to share the results, I had invited them to a small coffee shop nearby, trying to keep my emotions in check as they spread maps, charts, and data sheets across the table. I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of awe. "Mr. Thompson," the lead geologist said, pointing to a diagram of the land's subsurface layers, "we've confirmed that this property sits directly above a massive oil reserve. Initial estimates suggest there could be nearly $34 million worth of extractable oil here." I blinked several times, unable to speak. 34 million, the number seemed unreal. The very land that had been dismissed as worthless, the land my ex-wife had mocked, was potentially a fortune. It was almost too much to process. I don't understand. I finally managed to say, "All this time, this land was just dirt." He smiled. "Yes, it looked unremarkable from above, but underground it's a different story entirely. The oil reserve is significant, enough to make a huge impact on whoever owns this property. With proper extraction, the returns could be life-changing." For a moment, I leaned back in my chair, letting the words sink in. Memories of the divorce flooded my mind. The condo, the arguments, my ex-wife's smug laugh when she told me to keep the useless dirt. How ironic that the very thing she had dismissed was now more valuable than the property she had fought so hard to take. The company explained the next steps: legal approvals, drilling plans, environmental assessments, and investment partnerships. They offered me several options. I could sell the land outright, lease it to them for extraction, or partner with them for a share of the profits. Every choice had its advantages, but I felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. This was not just money. It was my chance to rebuild my life and reclaim confidence after the emotional toll of the divorce. As I signed the necessary documents to begin drilling, I couldn't stop thinking about the twist of fate. Life has a strange sense of humor. I thought the land my ex-wife ridiculed was about to make me financially independent. Secure and strong for years, I had felt powerless, trapped by the outcomes of our marriage and her decisions. Now, with this unexpected turn, I held the power to shape my own future. That night, I sat on the porch of my small apartment, staring at the dark Texas sky. The world felt vast and full of possibility. I allowed myself a small private smile, quiet, unassuming, but full of satisfaction. What had once seemed like a loss was about to become the greatest gain of my life. The worthless land was no longer just dirt. It was freedom, opportunity, and a chance to start over stronger than ever. And for the first time since the divorce, I felt truly alive, ready for whatever came next. Within a year, the small plot of Texas land had completely transformed my life. Lone Star Energy had begun the drilling and extraction process, and the results exceeded even their initial estimates. The oil flowed steadily, and with it came financial security I hadn't imagined possible just months ago. I paid off all my debts, cleared overdue bills, and even invested in a new home that was both comfortable and peaceful. The stress of the divorce that had once hung over me like a dark cloud now felt like a distant memory. The irony was not lost on me. The property my ex-wife had scoffed at had become more valuable than the luxury condo she had fought to claim. I remembered her smug smile during the settlement meeting and felt a quiet satisfaction. Life had a strange way of balancing things out. The condo, with all its grandeur and furnishings, had required constant maintenance, high taxes and rising utility costs. Meanwhile, my worthless dirt was producing tens of thousands of dollars every month, with minimal effort on my part. I kept a low profile at first, focusing on managing the extraction operations and ensuring that the project ran smoothly. The energy company handled most of the technical work, but I made sure to stay informed about every stage. I visited the site regularly, watching the machines drill deep into the ground, the crude oil being collected and prepared for transport. It was surreal. What had once been an empty, abandoned field was now a hub of activity, a small empire of energy and opportunity. News of the oil discovery eventually reached my ex-wife. I heard, through mutual acquaintances, that she was furious and bewildered, unable to believe that the land she dismissed as worthless could generate so much wealth. She had even tried to reach out through messages and emails, but I didn't respond. The divorce agreement was final and legally. She had no claim to the land. My silence was deliberate. I didn't need to prove anything, and I didn't want to relive the past. Financial independence gave me more than material comfort. It gave me peace of mind. I was no longer defined by the outcome of the divorce or her choices. I could travel, invest in my business, and plan my future on my own terms. The lessons I had learned through this experience, the value of patience, persistence, and perspective, felt priceless. One evening, I stood on the balcony of my new home, looking out over the calm Texas horizon. The wind carried a sense of freedom, and the sky was painted with shades of orange and pink. I thought about the twists of fate that had brought me here. The divorce, the laughter at my expense, the forgotten land that no one valued. It was almost poetic. Life had given me a second chance disguised as a loss. I had accepted without protest. The condo, the arguments, the heartbreak, all of it had been a stepping stone to this moment. My worthless land had turned into a fortune worth $34 million. But more importantly, it had turned into a symbol of resilience, independence, and unexpected opportunity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I smiled, knowing that sometimes the things people overlook can change your life in ways you never imagined. And so what once seemed like the end of the world became the beginning of something extraordinary. I had lost a luxury condo, but I had gained freedom, wealth, and the knowledge that life can surprise you when you least expect it.